Welcome back to It's All Interesting. My most favorite, because he's my most loyal guest, David D. Chapman. Thank you so much for joining us once again of the Chapman Show on YouTube. Check it out. David, post vice presidential debate. We were texting last night on X. What did you make of it? What did you think? Give me your thoughts.
I think that JD Vance did himself a lot of favors. The media helped. The media did a really good job of hurting Vance's image, and I believe Vance rehabilitated his image last night. Also, I think it was. I don't think I've ever seen anyone outside of maybe the Trump debates dominate someone as much as he dominated Walls. Walls didn't do himself any favors. He calls himself a knucklehead during a debate. I mean, you kind of know that you're losing. He also said that he has become friends with school shooters.
I don't
It's
I
like
right, I don't think I think I was listening to some post debate analysis last night with Megan Kelly and Mark Halperin, and Halperin made the point that he thinks what Walls meant was I'm friends with shooting victims and their
that
families.
is what he
I am
that
sure
is
that's what he meant. Yeah,
that is likely what he meant. However, the gaff
yeah.
will live on, and the memes are already going wild. You're going to see quotes from yesterday's debate. Tim Waltz, I become friends with school shooters. And that is a legit quote. We're not being crazy. Did he mean to say it? No. But he said it. And now he's going to be memed out of town.
What do you I noticed that prior to the debate, the Harris campaign was really downplaying expectations for Tim Walz, which was a bit surprising to me from the standpoint that he's been a sitting governor, he's been in Congress, he has had debate experience. I, he made some gas last night, but he he could he could speak.
Better than Biden. I mean,
Did did you did you think that had any um, did you think that paid off by virtue of the fact that there was this low expectation setting?
no, the expectations were still too high. Um, I think at one point the rumors were that they were going to dump him. I think towards like yesterday, I think they may have realized that this may not go well because I don't know if you saw it on Twitter, but there were rumors yesterday that Harris is maybe thinking about dumping him,
It's hard,
which was never gonna
right? It's hard
never
to
gonna
right
happen.
there, and some things,
Never gonna happen.
right? Those things you
Right?
can't take seriously. Yeah.
They're trying to downplay expectations. I think yesterday they had a feeling Walsh might be really nervous about this and might not be able to contain his anxiety, which is obviously what we saw in the first half, is that he was very nervous. And so I think maybe because of that, they just leaked that out, try to just stuff the expectations down even more. No, they were. He didn't do himself any favors. I think in many ways he could have hurt Harris. Normally, you don't hurt people. The VP debates they don't mean much, but I mean, people already don't like Harris, and they don't like this administration. Imagine how people feel about him being a heartbeat away from the presidency.
Well, I think the fact that you have two Midwestern gentlemen that have been chosen as vice presidential picks show that both campaigns are concerned about Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. So
Mm-hmm.
for that and I know you're a Midwestern guy, so for that Midwestern
Mm-hmm.
block, I assume I know your answer, but give me your take on who you think came across better, appealing to that group, because I think those people are tuned in at this state of the race. And I know there's the old saying that debates generally don't mean anything, which pretty much got blown out of the water after the Trump Biden debate in June. So, do you think this was basically a battle for the Midwest, and what effect? And we'll get to that a little more. What effect do you think this moved the needle at all for either of them, for either of the campaigns?
It doesn't move the needle for the campaigns. It'll move the needle for likability and dislikability for the vice presidents. Like I said, Vance needed a rehabilitation for his image because the media did successfully hammer him pretty good. You could see it in the polling; he was underwater. Where Trump actually worked his way above water for the first time in his political career. This is gonna fix that for Vance because I think a lot of people, you could see it on Twitter. I could see it at work. You they just like, oh, this guy's not that bad, you know. And talking about the Midwest, Vance articulated the message and what people are more concerned about. Where when he went after the experts part, where he's like, "Hey, you want to listen to experts? Well, we listened to experts when they said to send jobs overseas, and we're going to do fine that way, and it didn't work out." And I say we listen to common sense. That plays to the Midwest. So I think if we're fighting over Midwest votes, Vance won them last night. But I don't think it moved the needle. If anything, maybe Walz hurt Harris a little bit just because he appeared to be a bit of a knucklehead.
Yeah, a self-described knucklehead.
Yes.
Historically, David, um, I, have we seen vice presidential debates ever truly have an impact on a campaign? I know there were gaffes by Quayle. There's the famous Palin Biden debate. And I think an argument could be made that Biden had one of his best political moments in 2012 when he debated Paul Ryan. But those are moments. So, in terms of having an effect historically, and I know I just mentioned things over the last 30, 40 years in terms of modernity in politics, in terms of
Mm-hmm.
you as a historical analysis person, have there been presidential debates that have truly been consequential?
No, typically debates don't move the needle at all. That's why I'm very careful to say that this one has too. In fact, even presidential debates don't move the needle. There's really only two debates in presidential debates that you can say even move the needle, and that was the Reagan Carter debate, and then the Biden Trump debate
Hmm.
where Trump knocked Biden out. That's why it was controversial. Otherwise, there's really even no presidential debates that even move the needle.
Hmm.
So debate people don't vote on debates. They're entertaining. They're more for the undecided voter, but really the swing voter, undecided voter. There's been academic research done on this. They really don't exist. It's a polls pick up a larger portion than actually exists.
I think it's also a way, especially now that we're in October, it's a way for the country. And look, you and I are political junkies. People we follow on Twitter and X are political junkies. You and I are tuned into
Mm-hmm.
this stuff 24/7. But most of the country isn't, and we're aware of that. So I think it's a way for the country to kind of focus. Okay, it's election time. Now we got to start paying attention.
Yep. Yeah, it reintroduces the issues. People want to hear things. Certain unions and focus groups want to hear things. There are certain, one single issue voters want to hear certain buzzwords. Yeah, it'll also there'll be certain voters that'll just want to feel okay, and if they hear this and they hear that, they won't be so reluctant to vote
Hmm.
for this person, even though they're probably going to vote for him anyway.
Well, you just made a perfect segue because you mentioned unions. So I know you and I were chatting a little bit on Monday. Um, Tell us, David, what is going on? Because it seems like it's a complicated situation. What is going on? What's the latest with the longshoremen strike? And
So it's only
can you take us back to the beginning and the genesis of all this?
So I couldn't tell you too much of the genesis of it, other though I do know that the talks broke down in June. It's not so much overpay as it is automation,
Right. It seemed like there was a
because
contract in place, right, that the companies would not use automation during this
right,
contract term. And now the workers are complaining that automation has been used, which directly undercuts their contractual
right.
obligations.
The CBA has expired, and they want more protections. In the new CBA, that guarantees that they won't get automated out of a job. Um, Back in June, I believe, so they wanted a 77% pay raise. They were offered a 50% pay raise. Listen, if I was offered a 50% pay raise, I would take it. I think most people would. But they didn't have the automation protections in there. So they walked away. And that's where we've been
Hmm.
since. The international longshoremen president yesterday pretty much made news all over the world when he made it very clear that he's willing to cripple the economy if he has to get what he wants. Now, a little historical preference: these the fights for the against the automation, they're essentially fighting for job security. For a long time, we have seen people get automated, roboted out of jobs. You go all the way back to the Jackson administration. You had people that were against what was called internal improvements, which was just infrastructure spending. But people oppose things like railroads. Why? Because the steamboat driver would be out of work if the railroads would blow up and things like that. And so Jackson actually championed being against internal improvements because it was a worker thing, it was a populist thing. In many ways, Harris is only +9 among unions. She's doing worst of any Democrat among unions that we've ever seen.
I think
And
I
in many
saw a
ways,
Chiron yesterday where
yep.
2020 Biden plus 30,
Oh yeah.
2016 Hillary plus high teens, low 20s, and even way back when Bill Clinton 55, some numbers like that, huge gains with unions.
And this would not like it's risky for Trump to say something on this because you don't want to really get involved because politically you would actually like this to go on as long as possible, even though it might cause some pain. Because if this goes on 3, 4 weeks, the odds of Harris winning the election is very small because once you get to week 2, you're going to start seeing supply chains back up in a way that might start reminding people of COVID,
Right. And we already
especially.
had supply chain issues when the Biden administration first took over. There were the issues regarding
Yep,
formula and other items in stores. I was just going to ask you about the political implications of this.
yep.
I would think at this point the White House would be trying to do everything that they possibly could to try to solve this issue. Do you see the White House instituting Taft-Hartley to get these people back to work?
No, they're very clear they won't do it.
What do you think
I
the
think that
reasoning is behind that?
because Biden is quote the most pro union president out there. It's collective bargaining, as he said, and he'll let them work it out. The last time that the longshoremen went on strike was in 1977 under a Democrat who refused to invoke Taft Hartley, and the strike lasted 7 weeks.
Hmm.
Um, 7 weeks would be brutal for Harris's campaign. Like I said, once you start getting into week 2, week 3, things start backing up, start reminding people of what COVID was like, and that's a huge. Again, chaos goes to the benefit of the challenger. But there's also another component here because there's okay, around where I live, John Deere. Okay, they have a lot of contract workers too, where they only work if they have parts. And if they don't have the parts, they'll lay their workers off, and there's a lot of jobs like that around here. So, and it's already been made known that if this gets backed up too much, all of a sudden you're going to have layoffs because of this. And so, and I heard in the news that if the cars aren't being shipped, then you're going to start seeing some of these car salesmen get. So if you get into week 6, week 7, week 8, which is actually past the
Mm-hmm.
election, but you can actually start seeing other people lose their jobs from this.
Hmm. Hmm.
So
Well, that's it. Everything is, we live in a world now where everything essentially is connected, and the dots get connected between the shipping, between the people that work for the shipping, the people that work inside the country that rely on the shipping. So this could be a brutal fall. I don't just mean politically, but a brutal fall for Americans that were just kind of starting maybe ish to come out of some inflation. And this really could just back us right up into it.
I think politically, if you start to, it gets to week 2, week 3, and those supply chains start to back up. If there's some shortages at the grocery store, and it starts to remind you of COVID, that's when it's going to be bad for the Harris campaign,
Hmm.
because all of the layoff stuff that would happen long after the election, if in fact we would get there. Hopefully, we don't get there,
Hmm.
but the supply shortages and the supply chain backup, that could very well happen before the election, and that would be very bad politically for the incumbent party.
All right. Well, let's talk about politics. I think our favorite thing to do, or at least mine. There have been a. Let me ask you something. There's been a slew of polling that has come out with Harris with leads in certain states and with leads nationally. And then you look at other polling that has come out in terms of just you just mentioned in terms of union support, she's at historical lows. In terms of minority support, she's running behind where Joe Biden was running in 2020. In terms of the gender gap, in terms of the age gap, in terms of other metrics where she is running behind certain numbers. How could she be running behind on all these metrics, but yet maintaining leads in both state polling and in national polling?
So in some of these polls, like the Ipsos panel, so that's what Ipsos does. They're an online panel, a very bad online panel, and so with online panels, they're incentivizing people to take the poll, and that becomes very educated white liberal, and you're going to get a Harris +6 because it's overrepresented with educated white liberals. Your Ipsos panel is actually Reuters and ABC. It's the same data set. They sell it to ABC, they sell it to Reuters. Those two outlets will do whatever they want with the data set. Same with YouGov, Yahoo, um, Economist, and I always forget the third one, but there's like 5 polls out there with just 2 data sets, and you'll get a bunch of Harris +3 to Harris +7s off of just 2 data sets.
So, in your mind,
Um,
which data sets are have proven to be the best over the last 8 years, let's say, and which do you think people should rely on going into this?
So with those, the online panels I would ignore. That's the point that I'm making. Um, as you go on, there's also then your more university media polls that have it more closer. It's +2, +1. The national average is Harris +1.8. Ultimately, what we're going to see is that one, Trump is doing better among Hispanics and African Americans. But then we're also going to see on election day that Trump was understated among white support. So that is going to be significant, because if he's doing better among Hispanics and blacks and then understated among whites, then you're going to see a polling error. And as Qantas Insights has shown, when he does a model on just Cook partisan voting index, Gallup, and RCP's voting averages, polling averages, I mean, he finds that actually Trump is headed for an average 2.7 polling error, which is his average over performance. And if that happens, then the national vote is even and Trump sweeps the swing
Hmm.
states.
I think in terms of the swing states right now, the designated seven, the way we're looking at them, it seems that over the last week, a lot of polling has come out that has really indicated that Trump's support among the Sun Belt has been strengthening. Are you seeing the same thing?
Yes. Yes, especially in Arizona, where he is essentially right where he was in the average at this time in 2016, and the trend line is trending hard. Trump, he's at +2.1. He was at +2.5 at this point in 2016. Georgia, it's a little lower. But there's a few weird polls in the Georgia aggregate. But the important thing is in the aggregate, you can see that the trend line is going in the right direction with Georgia. I would also say that in Georgia, at this point in 2020, Trump had about the same lead. But then at this point in 2020, Trump got COVID, and Georgia was one of those weird states where they didn't like that,
Mm.
and it trended down, and Trump ended up with like a one half a point lead somewhere, and he ended up losing the state. Where if you assume now Trump's at the same point where he was trending up at this point compared to 2020, but then doesn't get COVID this time, perhaps now he continues to trend up and hits that 2016 mark again. That's just a theory, but it looks like that's where he's headed. For North Carolina, all of the polls are now Trump plus two, Trump plus two, Trump plus two. You probably have noticed that a few Trump
Mm-hmm.
plus ones. um, in the aggregate, it's Trump plus zero point 0.7. Sounds very small,
Mm-hmm.
but when you go back to 2016 and 2020, he wasn't leading in either at those points.
Mm.
Clinton was leading and Biden was leading. Also, in North Carolina, polling has not been good out of North Carolina for the last decade. They normally overrepresent the Democrat in North Carolina, but yet the Democrats have only won in North Carolina once since
And that was
1976.
2008 with Barack Obama, correct?
Right, when he won it by just 0.32%. So when you see a Harris plus 3 in North Carolina, you got to think to yourself, is she really going to do 3 points better than Obama in North
Mm-hmm.
Carolina?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It just doesn't seem plausible. Also, another thing is when you there it's a well-known fact according to Barris, who lives in North Carolina. He said that the census undercounted in the northeastern part of the state. So if a poll weighs their North Carolina data by the 2020 census, they will blow their data set.
Let me ask you, because obviously our hearts go out to all the people that are suffering
Yeah.
in North Carolina from the hurricanes, and we hope that they get the support that they need as soon as possible. Um, I think a legitimate question, is from either side of the aisle. What effect do you think this hurricane would have on the election with people being able to physically get to the polls?
So in 2016, there was a hurricane that hit the Panhandle like a couple weeks before the election, and I even myself was worried about the turnout in that area that Trump absolutely needed to win Florida. Back at that time, we thought Trump had to have Florida, Ohio, Iowa. He had to pull it inside straight. We had no idea the blue wall was in play. Um, but it turned out to be okay. People ended up going to vote in early in person. The vote by mail tends to be out of play at this point, because mail is out of commission for a while. But the early in person, people just once their lives get put back together, the campaigns will make an effort to go down there and remind people, please vote.
Mm.
They'll help them. They'll get there, and the vote will get out.
Mm.
Maybe it'll be a little bit of a drop, but it really won't be too much of an effect. If there's an effect, it'll actually be more on Democrats, because in Asheville, that is a Democrat city, and that's where the biggest hit
Mm.
was.
Mm. Mm. Well, hopefully those individuals really do get the help that they need as soon as possible. I know you and I had spoken about Michigan, and that was a state that the Harris campaign is doing better than most of the other swing states, and probably her strongest position there. However, over the
Yes.
weekend there was I don't know if it was leaked, but Senator Slotkin indicated that her numbers had, or I'm sorry, Representative Slotkin, her numbers had the Harris campaign underwater in
Mhm.
Michigan. Do you buy that? Do you think that was a politically calculated move for that story to get out to motivate people? What do you make of that?
Well, if you believe the rumors of the internal polling about a month ago had the Harris Trump race in Michigan about even. So it is plausible that a month later that she may have lost ground.
Mm.
So again, I'm not privy
Right.
to those, but I know that the report a month ago was that it was dead even
Yeah.
internally.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
All right. Well, in terms of the some of the early vote that we've been seeing, it's hard, at least for me, to take seriously any of the data that's coming out now, because I don't know it well enough to be able to make a true opinion on it. But I was hoping you could key us in on some of it, particularly in Virginia. I know the the right, the center right people online are very excited about the early Virginia numbers, and I generally like to just wait and see what happens before creating an opinion on something that I just don't know well enough. What do you see in Virginia from early numbers in terms of early voting, voter registration? We'll get into Pennsylvania after this. What do you see in Virginia specifically? Because that seems to be just this total white whale, unrealistic place that Republicans could end up and possibly win that.
well, so what I'm hearing is that there seemed to be a Republican uptick in Virginia in the red counties, and it's all from lower propensity voters, which is good because now you're 3 out of 4 and you're 4 out of 4 election voters are still there for you later in October and for
Well, that wait, wait.
the
So
election
that's
day.
the question that I had, right? So you see numbers in terms of this county, which is a red county,
Yep.
is up this percentage. This county, it's a blue county, it's down this percentage in terms of the early and the mail-ins. Couldn't the argument also be made that these folks, red, blue, whomever, that on the red side, that they wouldn't now those people just aren't people that are going to vote on election day that would have, and on the blue side that, oh, it's fine because those people are now just going to vote on election day.
So that is a simple argument. However, a
I'm a
lot of
simple man,
these
David.
yes. So but however, if you dig into it, what you'll find is that a lot of those voters that are voting on the red side are lower propensity or first time voters, and it's unlikely that they would ever vote on election day. Whereas on the blue side, most of them are higher propensity voters who vote during midterms, but they're Democrats, so they always vote early. Although I just tweeted out a poll before we came on. It does seem like there's a little bit more interest from Democrats to vote on election day. We'll see if that turns out to be the case because that's never the case with Democrats.
And then in terms of Pennsylvania, what is the current status in terms of the registration numbers? Because I know that's a big data point that both the left and the right likes to look at prior to election day.
So I don't know the exact registration numbers, but I believe that it's trending the same way as the rest of the country that the Republicans are adding and the Democrats are subtracting.
Um, all right. Last thing I'm going to leave you with. I know I keep asking you what should the campaigns focus on. I'm not going to ask you that. We got about 33 days to go. What do you expect for an October surprise now that we're in October? I know yesterday was a wild news day with Iran and Israel, the
Mhm.
longshoremen strike, the vice presidential debate, the hurricane. It's only October 2nd.
Right.
What else? What else can we expect here?
The longshoreman is a possible October surprise if it goes long enough and has an actual effect in the economy. Remember a couple months ago, Trump's campaign emails were hacked by the
Mm.
Iranians. The Democrats and I say the Democrats because they're the incumbent party. The government has those emails.
So there could be
It's
leaks.
very
There could be
likely
leaks.
they
Yeah.
could be released. Yes.
Okay.
So
All right. Well, that's something certainly to keep our eye on. All right. So, David, I'll give you the final word. Where can everybody find you? Tell us all about your new show. I know you mentioned it before, but give us everything about you.
So obviously I'm on X. You can go follow me there. I'm over on YouTube now. I've been having some guests. I've been doing some solo streams. Usually I do a solo stream over the weekend. This weekend I'll have On Point Politics on the show. So if you guys want to go check that out, it will be. I usually go about an hour. It's nothing too long or anything, but um,
And
I mean I've been getting some pretty yeah.
sorry, what's the name of your YouTube channel, David?
It's just the Chapman show.
Okay. I know David's been getting great guests. Really interesting show, breaking down polling and other election and political and historical matters. So, David, I am sure we're going to talk to you again before the election. Really appreciate you coming on such short notice.
Oh yeah, no problem.
Thanks so much.